Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. A very warm welcome to the Audit and Assurance webinar to success for September 2022 exam. And I am your tutor, Kashif Kamran. This is a single day webinar, and the single day webinar will give you all the insights you need to know of the March-June 22 paper. And we will be learning a lot from the March-June 22 paper today in the next couple of hours. So let's start the webinar to success. Now, the first thing, which is the focal point of this webinar to success for September exams, is a drill inside the March-June 22 paper. And I will be looking inside the March-June 22 paper right from the start to the end. And we will be discussing numerous aspects to bring success in the upcoming exams. Now, in terms of excellence in the AA paper, and primarily when we are looking at the March-June 22 exam paper, the first thing is time management, where I will be having a discussion with you. And then the particular time management for section A and section B, because that's extremely important. And what are the do's and don'ts of section A and B? More importantly, I will be looking inside understanding of the requirements, careful read of requirement, because I think you can have half the success in the paper if you know exactly what the examiner is asking for. And you will fail the paper if you don't understand what exactly the examiner is asking for. And we'll come to that later. Marks allocation, extremely important. How many marks you get for writing a valid point in the AA paper. Case linkage, linking your answer with the case as much as possible or where possible, and how to develop a good point, whether you're developing a good point for risk, or you're developing a good point for internal controls, or you are developing a good point for an audit report question, how to develop a good point. So this is all what I will be looking for in terms of the webinar to success and in terms of excellence in the AA paper. Let's start the journey and let's start looking inside the March-June 22 paper. Now, first of all, before I just enter into the practice platform and I put in front of the screen the paper and we start drilling the paper, let's first discuss the time management. Now, you know the AA paper consists of 195 minutes, which is 3 hours and 15 minutes. Now, section A of the paper is worth 30 marks. And section B of the paper is worth 70 marks. Now that means it is a very easy looking formula. 195 minutes, and you take 30% of the 195 minutes, which is approximately 58.5 minutes. I've just rounded it up, 60 minutes. Section B, 70% of the paper. So 70% of 195 minutes, that's roughly like 136.5 minutes. So I've just taken it at 135 minutes. So I have 60 minutes for section A and 135 minutes for section B. That is 30% and 70%. Now, how would you go about utilizing the 60 minutes in section A? And how would you go about utilizing the 135 minutes in the section B? Let's do a careful analysis of that. Section A and section B, split of time. The total time for section A is 60. The total time for section B is 135. But within the 60 minutes, what will you be doing inside the section A? And within the 135 minutes, what will you be doing inside the section B? Let's focus on that. Time management. Section A, 60 minutes. There are 3 OT cases, right? So each case gets 20 minutes. So you have 3 OT cases, right? And every OT case has 5 questions, 5 OT questions. So you have 3 OT cases, right? So every OT case gets 20 minutes. That's equal time. Out of the 20 minutes, 5 minutes should be kept for reading the case and understanding it. You have a small case, right? You have a small situation which you have to read and then take the right answers. So 5 minutes for reading in the case study, or 5 to 6 minutes for reading in the case study will vary from a student to student, but 5 minutes out of the 20 minutes should be kept for reading the case And then the remaining 15 minutes should be spent on the 5 OT questions. That means every OT question will get 3 minutes. So in 3 minutes, one OT question, reading the question and then clicking the right answer is so easy. You have read the case in 5 minutes. You know what is happening in the case. Now you read every question and you choose the best answer. And for every question, you have 3 minutes. Look at the amount of time. You're not in a panic. You're not in a hurry that in like 20 minutes, I need to mark 20 answers. No. In 15 minutes, you need to mark 5 answers. That is 3 minutes per marking of the OT question. Is that time management clear to all of you? So please give a proper time to section A. Don't be in a hurry. I've seen so many students in AA who are in hurry in section A. They just want to get over the section A in like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and they want to end it somehow, whether they're taking the right answers or they're taking the wrong answers. Please ensure 60 minutes is for section A and try to do the best you can in that 60 minutes. So once the 60 minutes is over and you have given time to every OT case, 20 minutes to every OT case, and 3 minutes per OT question, you are out of the section A with a fair chance that you will be scoring better marks. Then you move to the section B of the paper, which is a 70% of the paper, which is a constructed response area. And we know in the section B, you have 135 minutes and you have 3 questions. You have a question number 1, which is 30 marks. And out of the 135 minutes, you should be spending 60 minutes on the first question. That is 1 hour. Now, when you're putting 1 hour on the question number 1, out of the 135 minutes, 1/4 of the time should be spent on reading and planning, reading the case, understanding the requirements, reading and planning. And 3/4 of the time should be spent on WT, writing time, 45 minutes. So 15 minutes is your investment when you're reading. 45 minutes is your reflection, what you're writing. And remember one thing, reading and planning is a critical success factor. Without reading and planning, without knowing what to do, without understanding what to do, how can you reflect upon a good answer, whether it is section A or it is section B? So in section B, when you have 60 minutes to do the question number 1, spend 1/4 of that time on reading and planning, because reading and planning is the investment which will bring success. And 3/4 of the time is to be spent on writing the answer. Same goes with the question 2, worth 20 marks. You have 37 minutes for that. And out of the 37 minutes, 1/4 of the time, which is 9 minutes, should be spent on reading and planning the question 2, and 28 minutes should be spent on writing the answer. And the same equation is for the question number 3, 37 minutes, out of which 9 minutes should be spent on reading and planning, and 28 minutes on writing. Look at the time, 135 minutes here. And you're spending 15 minutes, you're spending 9 minutes, and you're spending 9 minutes. So that's 9 and 9, 18, 18 and 15, 33. 33 minutes you are spending on reading and planning out of the 135 minutes. So you have 102 minutes to write the actual answer. But I hope as accountants, you do the cost benefit analysis, right? As accountants, you look at return on investment. Is this a good return on investment? The investment you are doing in terms of reading and planning time will give you return. What return? A good answer. What return? A successful exam sitting. What return? Getting more than 50% marks in the AA paper. Is everyone clear with this time management on your screen? Between section A and section B, is everyone clear with the importance of investment in the reading and planning time? I hope you do that, right? Because that's extremely important. So be sure of the time management you will be following in your upcoming exams on Monday. Be sure of how would you split between section A and section B. Okay, now moving further away from the time management, Reading requirements carefully is half success. And that's what I will do shortly now. Once I open the practice platform and once I start drilling the practice platform, I will be demonstrating that reading the requirement is half success, because when you know what to do and how to do, you can put a very good answer. But when you don't know what to do and how to do, you are blank. What will you do then? Try to understand the requirement. Try to materialize the importance of the reading and planning time in the AA paper. So I'll be coming to this. Reading requirement carefully is half the success. But let's first open the exam paper and let's then start to investigate reading requirement carefully is half success. Let's open the practice platform. But just before opening it, I want to show something to you which is critical. I hope you can see in front of your screen the examiner report for March-June 22 paper. Can you please confirm that? Okay, thank you. Now, one thing which is important, when you look at the practice platform, which I will be showing you shortly, and you look at the question paper on the practice platform consists only of the section B. But if you want to practice the OT cases and if you want to practice the OT questions, you will find the OT cases and OT questions inside the examiner report. Examiner report is a very important document, right? An examiner report is a document which gives you a constructive feedback of the do's and don'ts, which enables a student to pass and fail in the AA paper. But alongside the constructive feedback, the examiner report also contains the section A of the paper, which is the OT cases. So you go down this report and you look at the section A. I'll click on the section A here, which is on page number 2, and I reach section A. See, this is where examiner is telling us about section A on page number 2, and examiner is giving us the exam questions here. See, this is where the exam questions are starting for. Examples of a case scenario. An examiner is giving us a case scenario, which you have to read ideally in 5 minutes in exam. And then under the case scenario, you have the questions. Question number 1, take the right answer. For every question, you have 3 minutes. That's what I was demonstrating. So for every case, you have 5 minutes to read the case. And for every question, you have 3 minutes to think and put the right answer. So if you want to be good on the OT questions and OT cases, examiner report is a source document for that. So you can revise these OT questions ahead of your exams on Monday, right from this March-June examiner report, where plenty of questions are given for you to practice from the March-June 28 paper. So section A, and section A consisting of page number 2 to page number 7. So you can practice page number 2 to page number 7 of the March-June 22 examiner report, and page number 2 to 7 consist of the section A, which can give you a good practice. You can also download other examiner reports, like you can download examiner report for September, December 21 or March-June 21, because in every examiner report, you will get the section A, and you can practice a lot of OT cases ahead of your exams on Monday if you haven't done yet. If you have, that's wonderful. So one thing which is good in examiner report is the section A of the paper. Is that clear? And the second thing in the examiner report is the constructive feedback. Examiner will tell you this is what the student did good and this is what the student did bad. So you can learn a lot out of the examiner report, and I'll be giving you a glimpse of that shortly in my session today, once I go into the section B of the paper and I start looking at the examiner report right from section B of the paper. Okay, let's open the practice platform in front of your screen now. I hope you can see the practice platform in front of your screen with the section B, March-June 22 paper. Can you all see the March-June 22 paper in front of your screen? The section B? Great. Okay. Now, I want to demonstrate, we're not solving a paper, right? But we are trying to find the best techniques which can bring excellence in your upcoming exams on Monday, right? So listen to me carefully as we go through the questions. We try to understand the nature of questions. We try to understand the marking scheme. We try to understand the importance of connecting the requirements with the case study. Now, first of all, you open the question number 1, which is right in front of your screen. And we know the question number 1 has a total of 60 minutes of the time in exam. And out of the 60 minutes, 15 minutes should be spent on reading and planning, and 45 minutes should be spent on writing in the answer. So you open the question, see this is your actual exam, for example, and you look at the first question. The first question says, describe the preconditions for an audit that Bennock and Company should have established prior to accepting the audit of ESK Company 4 marks. Now, the very first thing you need to write is describe the preconditions for the audit, Control C, and you bring it down under here on your word processor and you put 4 marks. Now, everything in the AA paper is worth 1 mark. That is a very simple looking marking scheme for the AA paper. So every valid point you write will give you 1 mark. So when you look at this question asking you to describe the preconditions for an audit, 4 marks, you need to write the 4 preconditions. And just before the precondition, examiner is giving you a reference of the ISA 210, agreeing the terms of engagement. Now we know when we write an engagement letter, in that engagement letter, we also write our preconditions as part of the engagement letter. So examiner is asking you to write the preconditions. Describe, look at this word describe, not list. Now, for example, a student writes the answer this way. A student goes down and start writing the answer. Describe the preconditions. Management should prepare financial statements. Management should implement internal control system. Management should provide auditor with all information. And he's so happy. I've done a good answer. Let's go to the next question. Let's go to the next screen. Next. And next comes the B part, the C part. Try to think for a minute. You've done a blunder. What blunder have you done? Examiner was asking you to, sorry, just 1 minute. Examiner was asking you to describe, not to list. Do you believe this answer is worth 4 out of 4 marks? Not at all. You might get half a mark for bullet number 1, half a mark for bullet number 2, half a mark for bullet number 3, and you might just be fetching 1.5 marks out of 4 because you just put the listing. You just put the listing. You didn't describe it. Now, if I am writing an answer, I would write it this way. Describe the preconditions for an audit. And remember, these are knowledge marks. And if any student is losing on knowledge marks, you are making your success difficult. If wherever you get knowledge marks, like describe the advantages and disadvantages of documenting the internal control system, or explain the terms of the engagement letter, something like this, where you get the knowledge marks in the AA paper, you're not losing on them, because if you're losing on them, then your survival is difficult. Now, see, if I need to write an answer, how would I be going about it? I would be saying, describe the preconditions. The auditor should confirm that ESK Company, I brought the name of the company so I can write a specific answer. The auditor should confirm that ESK Company management is using a suitable, sorry, is using an acceptable financial reporting standards in preparing the financial statements. The acceptable standard should be the one should be the one governed by local laws and regulations where ESC operates. So you should follow the financial reporting standards, whichever is applicable to the country where ESC is operating. So the auditor should confirm, first of all, that ESC management is using an acceptable financial reporting framework in preparing the financial statement. The acceptable standard should be the one governed by local laws and regulations where ESC operates as a company. Number one. Number two, then you come down. First, you're checking the acceptability of the framework. That is the number one precondition. Acceptability of the framework. Is the framework acceptable? Then you come to the number two. Management is responsible. Management is responsible, number one, to prepare and present the financial statements in accordance with the acceptable laws as discussed above. So first, you're looking at the acceptability of the laws. If the laws are acceptable, then you're saying the management is responsible now to prepare and present the financial statement in accordance with the acceptable laws as discussed above. Number two, to implement an internal control system to ensure that fraud and errors are prevented and detected on a timely basis, on a timely basis. And number last, to provide all information and explanation to the auditor so that the auditor can perform the audit in an efficient manner and complete the audit within the stipulated deadlines. Now, this is what you should be writing for 4 marks. Management is responsible, right? And you write 1 to 3. If you want to write management is responsible, management is responsible, management is responsible 3 times, it is better put it once and then write bullets under. Now look at the 4 marks answer. This is a worthy 4 marks answer. Describe the preconditions. You describe them in proper sentences. Now that's a question which will definitely be worth 4 out of 4. So please don't lose the knowledge marks and please look for this word, whether this word is describe or this word is list or this word is recommend. So that makes a difference in terms of the length of the answer you are writing, right? So that's the first question worth 4 marks and everything in the AA paper is worth 1 single mark. Now you move to the next question, question number B, 1B. And you get to the 1B. Let's see what the 1B is asking for. Now the question number 1B is asking for using the table below. So examiner has already given you the table. Calculate 4 ratios, not more than 4, not less than 4, 4. And just calculate, not comment, for both years. So examiner has given you the table. So at least you can see the table that the table has 4. So you will not do any blunder, making 5, making 6, or at least you will not do blunder of commenting on the ratio, just calculating ratios for both years, which would assist you in planning the audit of S company. Gross profit margin, inventory holding period, receivable collection period, and the payable payment period. Formulas are not required to be shown. Now, this is something where students are so bad at. Every requirement or some of the requirements in the AA paper can consist of a signpost. Signpost means note. This is a signpost, right? Which I highlighted in a green. Signpost. Signpost means an information. You are going on a road and you see a signpost, a speed breaker ahead. Or you go on a road and you see a signpost, signal ahead. This is signpost, right? Examiner is putting a signpost as well. And examiner is saying, no formulas. If you still do formulas, you're wasting your time. And are you impressing the marker with formulas? No, because the marker is saying, I don't need formulas. You're wasting your time. And you're not impressing the person checking your paper with formulas. So try to follow the instructions. Try to follow the notes given under the requirements. Is that clear to all of you? A lot of time I've seen students, they ignore the note. Firstly, they don't read the requirements. They even don't read the requirement carefully. So how would you expect a student to read the note under the requirement? So there is an importance of reading the note number, right? Which can save a lot of time in exam paper. Examiner will tell you in the note number, you have to do this, or examiner will tell you in the note number not to do this. So follow the instruction of your marker or your examiner. 4 marks. Now, that means we have to calculate ratios for both years. That is for 20x5 and 20x4. So 4 marks means 1 mark per ratio. So we get half a mark for 20x5 and half a mark for 20x4. You just need to put in the right answers, right? So for example, a gross profit margin, you'll open your calculator on the screen, or you want to use your own calculator, you can use your own calculator as well. So that's totally up to you. So I prefer that you take your own calculator to exam hall. That's pretty easier to use than an on-screen calculator. As a tutor, I'm even more comfortable with a calculator of my own rather than an on-screen calculator. How many of you are comfortable using an on-screen calculator? Can you just confirm? Anyone who is comfortable in the session using an on-screen calculator? Okay, okay, no one is saying I am comfortable. Okay, so it's better using your own, right? So in the session, I'm just using an on-screen. We have to use the gross profit margin. 7.6 is the gross profit for the last year. And so we divide the 7.6 with 27.5, which is the revenue. So dividing 7.6 with 27.5 into 100, we get the gross profit margin 27.63. So the gross profit margin is 27.63% in 20x4. And the same way, you calculate it for the current year. Now for the current year, it is 8.4 divided by 30.9, which is the revenue, into 100. And you get it 27.18. So the gross profit margin for this year is 27.18. So there's just a marginal decline in the overall gross profit margin from the last year to this year. Now, just by showing this, you're getting 1 mark per ratio. Half a mark for 20x5 and half a mark for 20x4. Is that clear to all of you? Now, isn't these easy marks in AA paper? Preconditions for an audit, calculating 4 ratios, 4 easy marks, and this 4 easy marks, 8 easy marks so far out of the 100 marks paper. So don't lose such easy marks with your careless attitude in the paper. Is everyone clear? Moving on, the next requirement, the big requirement and a typical requirement, a regular requirement of the AA paper, this one. In every single exam setting, in the section B, you will find this requirement, this one. Using the information provided in the case study on the left-hand side of the screen and the ratios calculated. Describe 8 audit risk and response to risk. So you need to describe 8 audit risk and response to risk. You have 16 marks. So that means 8 risk is worth 8 marks and 8 responses worth 8 marks, and you get 16. You can find the risk not just from the case study on the left-hand side of the screen, you can also find the risk from the ratios. So you can find like 1 to 2 risk from the ratios, and you can find the remaining 5 to 6 from the information given on the left-hand side of the screen. So you have an opportunity not just to find the risk from the case study, but also from the answers of the ratio you calculated. And I hope you are clever enough to investigate a ratio for understatement and overstatement. I hope you're clear with that. Okay, now just listen to me carefully. When you look at a requirement where the examiner is asking for 8 audit risks and responses, you need to understand something very carefully. Let me take you back to the examiner report for the question we are looking for. ESK company. I hope you can see the examiner report. I just want to read something with you from this examiner report. I'm only be doing the examiner report for the critical parts, right? So if I look at the critical parts from this examiner report, the critical part is the 16 marks requirement in the first question. Okay, can you see this right in front of your screen? Examiner report requirement C, 16 marks. So wherever we come across a critical requirement, I will get into the examiner report and discuss that with you. Now, using the information provided and the ratios calculated, describe 8 risk and explain the responses. Now, what a student can do wrong with 8 risk and responses, and what the examining team wants you to do incorrect. Marks are awarded for identification of risk half, explanation of risk half, and for an appropriate response 1. So if you just identify a risk in exam, but you fail to explain it, you are still getting half a mark. And if you write the response, you will get 1. But if your response is weak or your response is a bit inappropriate, you might even fetch 0. So half a mark for identifying a risk, half a mark for explaining risk, and 1 mark for writing a response. So that's 2 marks. And how many you need to write? 2 multiplied by 8 is equal to 16. Now, one thing which I need to discuss with you is this one. Look at the paragraph. This is an opportunity for all of you. Look at this para on your screen, which I'm just highlighting in blue. The scenario will typically contain more than the number of risk required. So it is important that the candidate plan their time carefully and only attempt to list the number of points you need. The next para, the first step when you're reading the case is to identify the factors which will give rise to an audit risk. This information can be found in the scenario. All of the information in the scenario should be read carefully from the start to the end, including the opening paragraph, as this may include information relevant to the identification of the audit risk. So reading the opening paragraph is important, such as whether this is a new client. So information about a new client will be given in the opening paragraph. And if it is a new client, then automatically translates to an audit risk. As was the case in S company, and is often overlooked. So examiner is saying the student normally overlooked the opening paragraph. And in the case of S company, it was a new audit client and the student overlooked that. So examiner is saying you need to read from start to end. Wherever you find a factor which translates into a risk, just highlight that and see how many factors you get at the end of the case. If you get something like 12 factors and you need to write 8 of them, choose the best you can write on. When undertaking this read through, it would be a good exam technique to use a highlighting function, as this provides a visual aid for quickly spotting the audit risk. Having looked at the whole scenario and highlighted every relevant point which you believe is a risk, candidates should pick their 8 strongest points. Look at this last sentence. Candidates should pick their 8 strongest points, rereading them from the scenario, drafting their answer as they go along. Look at this technique. So when you're reading a scenario, read from start to end. Wherever you find a factor which you believe is a risk, highlight that in yellow, green, blue, whatever, and go on and on and on. And once you're done, see how many highlights you have. If you have like 12 highlights, that means you have 12 risks. Now choose the one you need to write on. Choose the 8 you're best at, because you don't want to lose marks. So is that clear to all of you? And this goes with the question which comes on internal control weaknesses, right? In a question on internal control weaknesses, you have more than the number of weaknesses required. Again, you will highlight the number of weaknesses going from top down, and you will find more. Then you have to write the number required by the examiner, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Is everyone clear with this yellow paragraph? Please confirm so we can move on. Are you fine, clear, good with this para in the yellow? Okay, is this a good exam technique examiner is telling you? Will you follow this in the next 24 hours ahead of your exams? right? So please be logical with this. The next one I want to read here. Financial accounting knowledge is also important as audit risk will often focus on accounting treatments used in the financial statements. And that's important, right? You're coming from the financial reporting paper to the AA paper, or you are giving the financial reporting and the AA paper together. And there are lots of risk in the scenario which relates to accounting treatments, because a wrong accounting treatment, a wrong classification, a wrong valuation, a wrong disclosure, a wrong recognition itself is a risk. So in S company, accounting issues which give rise to audit risk includes those relating to intangible assets, bank loans, inventory valuation, contingent assets, and a provision. The risk least identified by candidates related to ESC being a new client, because the student didn't read the opening paragraph where it was mentioned that it is a new audit client. Candidates should expect a range of topics within an audit risk scenario, some of which may be more challenging than others. If you have practiced 5 papers on audit risk, you will also find there is a lot of repetition in the risk factor in the AA paper. But yes, some of the risk factor might be challenging, might came for the first time in your upcoming exams in September. But again, the point is you have more risk in the scenario and you need to write less. So if there is a challenging factor which you don't understand, ignore it, because you will still be able to find 8 risk. I hope you're getting this message, right? So if you believe something is not clear to you and you're not understanding it, leave it, because you will still be able to find the 8 risks you need to write on. But again, accounting knowledge plays a crucial part, because there are lots of risks which will connect with your accounting knowledge. The next, when tackling audit risk question, which includes ratios, such as the one we are doing, the results of the calculations should be considered when identifying the risk. Now, where the movement in the ratio year on year is minimal, as the case with the gross profit margin, which decreased from 27.6 to 27.2, then it is unlikely this movement leads to a significant audit risk. Now, we calculated the gross profit margin, right? It was like 27.6 in the last year, and it was 27.2 this year. Now, that was just a marginal change. Now, you cannot waste time picking up the risk in this. There's no risk. Yes, but if there is an abrupt, like the gross profit margin last year was 27.6 and the gross profit this year is 29%. You will say, oh, this has increased a lot. Now, there might be a risk that revenue could be overstated, or there might be a risk that the cost of sales is understated. Then you can comment on it. But if there is a marginal change, leave it. Examiner is saying this is not a significant risk. Full stop. However, in the case of the significant movement of the receivable collection period, along with other information in the scenario about the lack of an experienced credit controller, this possibly identifies a risk of an overvaluation of trade receivable. We didn't calculate the receivables, right? But examiner is saying when you calculate the receivable of the last year and of the current year, you will find they're increasing a lot. And then in the case study, it is mentioned that the credit controller is not very experienced. So that increases the risk that the receivables could be overstated and you have not recognized the bad debts properly. And in that case, the expenses could be understated and the receivables could be overstated. So that is what the examiner wants you to do. So if you find a ratio which is changing a lot from the last year, you need to find some information in the case which can be supported in writing the answer for that ratio. So a credit controller can be linked with the receivable collection period, and then you can translate a good audit risk. Is that clear to all of you, this paragraph? So wherever I get a major requirement for 10 marks and 16 marks, I'll come back to the examiner report, because examiner report will exactly give you the mindset which you need to put the right answer in the AA paper. Okay, few of the last paragraphs quickly. This is very critical paragraph, and listen to me very carefully. Just let me highlight this in a different color so you can pick it out. I hope you can see this paragraph in green now, right? Having identified the risk factor, when you're reading the case, you were reading the case and you found, oh, this is the risk factor, this is the risk. The next step is to explain the risk. To do this, candidate needs to state the specific area of the financial statement which impacted, like an assertion, or like an understatement, or like an overstatement, or like a control risk, like a detection risk, like an inherent risk. Now listen to me carefully. When you say this will result in asset being overstated. Now, asset is a very general word. Specify. Intangible asset overstated, inventory overstated, tangible asset overstated. Which asset are we talking about? Property, plant, and equipment overstated. You need to specify. If you say liability understated, which liability? Current liability, non-current liability, a bank loan, what? Specify. So a lot of time the student just write a journal statement, asset will be overstated, liability will be understated. You're not specifying which one in the case context. That's the first problem. The second problem is, for example, you are doing a situation where you believe inventory is not properly valued at the lower of cost or NRV. Then you will pick up the risk that there is a risk of an inappropriate valuation. Now, valuation is an assertion. So if there is a risk of inappropriate valuation, this will result, or this could result in the overstatement of inventory and understatement of the cost of sales, something like that. For example, you're looking at a loan, which is a 5-year loan, and you believe that a 5-year loan should be split between a non-current loan and a current loan. Now, there is a classification risk. So you have to highlight that there is a risk of an inappropriate classification, and there is a possibility that the management could classify the 5-year loan as a non-current liability, which could result in understatement of the current liabilities. So try to pick up what is the issue. Revenue. If you believe in the case of the revenue, the performance obligation has not been met, and the management has still recognized the revenue, then there is a risk of a wrong recognition. Then there is a risk of recording revenue too early. And because of recording revenue too early, the revenue could be overstated or is overstated. So try to pick up the issue. Is the issue with classification? Is the issue with recognition? Is the issue with a presentation? Is the issue with something being wrongly valued, etc.? Because you are all accountants, right? When you look at the accounting standards, what does an accounting standards deal with? I think the accounting standard either deal with the recognition of something, with the valuation of something, with the disclosure of something, or with the classification of something, or with the presentation of something. Now, what can be a risk? An inappropriate presentation, an inappropriate classification, an inappropriate recognition, an inappropriate valuation, or inappropriate disclosure. This is the maximum situations in the AA paper. So try to pick up the risk and then try to tell the impact of the risk on the financial statements, whether it is understated or overstated, and try to find a particular balance. Don't just write a journal statement in the exam. Financial statements could be materially misstated. Financial statement is a broad term. If you're talking about a liability, then try to mention that the liability could be understated. If you're talking about an asset, try to mention that the asset could be overstated, and also specify the class of the asset and the class of the liability, which is important. If you're writing a first-year audit, then you can say, because auditor has less knowledge of business, this will increase the detection risk in the first-year audit. Detection risk becomes a terminology. Examiner saying you can write this term detection risk in the answer. Or when you're writing, there is no internal audit department in the company, and you say, okay, because there is no internal audit department in the company, this will increase the risk of fraud and errors, or this will increase the risk of material misstatement in the financial statement. This is a control risk. You can write sentences like such, which will add value to your answer. Look at this para in green in front of you. Is everyone clear with the examples I've given you? Is that a critical way you can improve the quality of your answer you're writing for audit risk? Everyone? So is examining reports important? Are they giving you the right mindset you need to deliver a good answer for audit risk? So please ensure you read the paragraphs. Okay, then moving next, few of the last one. The explanation of risk, I'm reading this first paragraph in yellow. The explanation of risk must also clearly state the specific area of the financial statement impacted. For example, in respect of the issue relating to capitalization of the admin cost within the patent, only noting that non-current asset or asset could be overstated would not be awarded credit. An explanation appropriate in this instance would be intangible assets could be overstated. When you're talking about patent and you say asset will be overstated, you're talking about patent and you're saying non-current assets could be overstated, it is wrong. Patent is what? Patent is an intangible asset. So you have to say intangible asset could be overstated. You have to be very particular to fetch 1 mark. I hope you're clear with that, right? So please ensure that you are reading and explaining things in an appropriate manner. And the last thing, just to save my time, look at this first paragraph here in blue. The first paragraph in blue is about the auditor responses. But before I make my summary quickly, having identified and explained the risk, the next step is to provide the auditor response. Responses must be practical within the context of the scenario, and care should be taken to ensure that the response is the one an auditor would make, not a management. For example, there is no physical security, and you say there should be a physical security. This is a management response, right? This is what the management should do. You should be writing a response what the auditor should do. You should write what the auditor should do, not what the management should do. So in the session, candidate provided management responses for the audit risk relating to the miscoded invoices, damaged inventory, and lack of an experienced credit controller, suggesting that the company should appoint an experienced credit controller. This is management response. Appoint a credit controller. This is not an auditor response. As an auditor, I would see how would I verify the bad debt expense. I would see how would I ensure that the age analysis has incorporated the outstanding invoices. I would be interested in reviewing the age analysis. I would be interested in reviewing the assumptions used by management in recognizing the bad debt expense. I'm not interested in appointing the credit controller. This is the management duty. So if you are writing a response, which is what the management should do, 0 marks. You should write what the auditor should do. It is an auditor response to a given situation. So if there is a risk of bad debts, what will the auditor do to mitigate the risk of bad debt? Will the auditor check the assumptions, underlying assumptions? Will the auditor review the age analysis? Will the auditor recalculate the bad debt expense? What? Something the auditor should do, which is known as your procedures, which is known as your substantive procedures primarily. So please ensure that when a question like such comes in exam paper, which is asking for an audit risk and an audit response, you need to be very specific. First of all, the audit response has to be clear, and it should be an auditor response, not management. And secondly, when you're writing a risk, you will get a 0.5 marks for identifying the risk factor from the case which give rise to risk, and another 0.5 marks for explaining the risk, including what the risk is and what is the impact of the risk on the financial statements, question mark. So if your statement includes, is this a risk of classification? Is this a risk of valuation? Is this a risk of recognition? Is this a risk of presentation? Risk. And what that risk leads to, what has been understated, what is being overstated, that is how you fetch your marks. So please be sure that when you're writing a good answer for an audit risk and an audit responses, try to read through the case, try to find the risk factors. There will be more than 8 risk factors. Choose the one you want to write upon. And then when you're converting it to an answer, please ensure you're writing a realistic answer, not an unrealistic answer. Is that clear? I'm just taking on my Word file, which I will be sharing with you. And audit risk is a critical topic. So I just want to spend some time on audit risk here quickly. If you are writing an answer for audit risk, please ensure whatever the examining team has told you in the examiner report. But just one good example here. Audit risk. 1 mark per risk explained. Now, when you're explaining a risk for 1 mark, pick up the statement from the case which defines the risk. Now, that could be something in the case like a bank loan for 5 years, or like the patents not being amortized, or the first year audit. There could be a certain statement in the case, an accounting statement or a non-accounting statement. There is no internal audit department, something like that. Pick up a statement from the case which defines the risk. Explain the statement. Explain the statement for why it is, what is the risk? What is the risk? What is the risk? For example, is there a risk? Is there a risk of wrong classification or inappropriate valuation or inappropriate disclosures or early recognition of revenue or inappropriate recognition of research cost. Suppose you capitalize the research cost, inappropriate recognition of a research cost, or inappropriate classification of a long-term loan, etc. What is the risk? What is the risk? Examiner is interested in knowing that. Now, when you say this is the risk, then you have to tell what is the impact. Impact on the specific area of the financial statements. For example, intangible assets overstated or depreciation expense understated. Look at my specification. I'm not saying operating expenses. If there is a need, then you can say, or depreciation expense understated, amortization expense understated, finance cost understated, tax expense understated. Look at the specifications. Inventory overstated. I'm not saying current assets. Inventory overstated, receivable overstated, etc. Specify. So pick up the statement which you will be picking when you are reading the case top down and you're underlining the statements or you're highlighting the statements. But when you convert the statement into another half a mark, you need to specify first what is the risk, and then you need to specify what is the impact. So if you do that minimum, you're fetching another 0.5 marks for telling two things. What is the risk and what is the impact? So these are minimum things you can do to fetch 1 mark for a very good audit risk answer. Is that clear to all of you? I hope you got some lessons and learnings from reading of this examiner report, and I hope you can do this fine-tuning ahead of your upcoming exams on Monday. So I'll be sharing this file with you, right? Don't worry. Whatever I'm writing on this Word file comes to you after the end of the session. Okay, just let's move back to the practice platform. So this is a critical question, right, which comes in every single exam setting where you have to explain the risk and responses. So this is one very good question in a 100 marks paper. And you need to read through the case study and you need to find maximum possible risk and then choose the 8 good one you are writing on. Moving on to the next part of this question number 1. The last part of this question number 1, which is the part D. Describe the substantive procedures. Now, this is such a regular feature of the AA exams, and I need to focus 10-15 minutes on this, because when you look at a 70% of your paper, in that 70%, you have like 12 to 14 marks or 12 to 16 marks on risk. You need to be very strong. Then when you look at the other marks out of 70, I think 6 marks on minimum to maximum 15 marks in a certain exam setting is on audit procedures. And you need to be very strong on these audit procedures to fetch good marks. Substantive procedures. The auditor should perform on the trade receivable of ESC. Now, when you're writing substantive procedures, and I hope you remember my mnemonic CASP, that whenever you're writing an audit procedure in exam procedures, and you look at number of marks, 6 marks divided by 1, so you need to write 6 procedures. Now, when you look at a procedure, you need to write a procedure on what? You need to write a procedure is equal to ESC company trade receivable. Now, ESC company trade receivable is something which is inside the case study, right? Is something in the case. Is the examiner asking me to write a journal procedure on receivable? No. Examiner is asking me to write a procedure on the ESC company receivable. Is something in the case. So that's where I tell my students that whenever you are writing a procedure, it needs to have a C, a A, a S, a P. It should be case specific. You need to pick out something from the case specific action. You should write a procedure with an action. A procedure cannot be without action. A procedure should have a source, a subject matter, and a procedure should have a purpose. If all the 4 attributes are present, you get 1 out of 1. Let me demonstrate you quickly. Now, the screen on the left, you will pick up a paragraph where you have ESC company receivables. So you go down and down and down and down. Let's see in which paragraph examiner is explaining something about receivables. Okay, fine. We got this paragraph on receivables here. This one. The manager in S company credit control department has been off since December due to ill health. As a result, S company has not been monitoring the aging of receivables and only follow-ups on outstanding invoices. When the system alerts credit controller that a customer invoice has been outstanding for 90 days, the standard credit terms are 30 days. Now, this is the paragraph control C. I highlight this paragraph in yellow, and I bring this paragraph on my word processor in the exam hall. Now, I will use this paragraph making 6 procedures, and then I'll delete this paragraph when I write my answer. So you can copy paste a paragraph, but once you used it in the exam, delete it. So you can use when you're writing, but you can delete when you have written the answer. Now, I just need to find 6 procedures on the receivables, right? And also a student must have calculated the receivable days, right? So a student must have calculated the receivable days, 4.9 and 7.2, whatever the answer is. And you have the revenue 30.9 and you have the revenue 27.5. Can anyone quickly find me the answer for receivable days in just 1 minute? I'm waiting. Can you divide 4.9 with 27.5 and 7.2 with 30.9 and just quickly give me the answers for receivable days so I can translate that into a procedure? I'm just waiting, right? Receivable days in 20x5R and in 20x4R. Okay, I'm just waiting for your answers. I hope you're using a calculator quickly. Let's see who gives me the answer quickly. 4.9 divided by 27.5 into 365. 7.2 divided by 30.9 into 365. Quickly, the answers. And do mention which year you're talking about. Okay, got the first answer. 85 and 65. Thank you. 85 and 65. 85 and for 20x4, 65. So is there a significant surge? It can also translate into an audit risk, right? That is what the examiner was telling us, right? Okay, now we have case. Now it's time to write procedures. Now my first procedure, which I could think about in exam, is discussing reasons for the rise in the receivable collection period, right? One could be discuss the reasons for rise in the receivable collection period. I can ask why. I can ask why from the management. So this is just like a brainstorming, right? Next, I can also, the manager in S credit control department has been off since December 20x4, right? And what's the year end of the company? 31st of August. So that means January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So for 8 months, we don't have a credit controller due to ill health and has been replaced by an inexperienced temporary manager. So I can also discuss with management, discuss plans for a permanent replacement, or discuss why no proper person is implemented, why no proper person is put in place. So I want to know management reason why they're not putting a proper person in place instead of putting a temporary person in place. And it's been last 8 months, right, since your credit controller has been ill. So that's quite a long time. As a result, S company has not been monitoring the aging of its receivables. So you're not been monitoring the aging of your receivables, and only follow-ups on outstanding invoices when the system alerts the credit controller that a customer invoice has been outstanding for more than 90 days. Now, that means I need to review the age analysis myself because no one is monitoring it. So I need to review the age analysis. I need to identify the outstanding invoices. I need to have the total of outstanding invoices. How much is the total of the outstanding invoices to know what should be the likely bad debt expense? Identify the outstanding invoices, the total of invoices beyond 90 days. I need also to identify the significant invoices which are more than like 180 days overdue, like an year overdue. Review the age analysis for any unusual invoices. For example, overdue by 180 days and no action has been taken. So no one is monitoring the age analysis, right? So I just need to look at the document age analysis. I just need to see what's happening inside the document age analysis. How many customers are struggling because your receivable days have increased a lot. That means customers are struggling to pay. That means there are many receivable balances which needs to be classified as bad debts. So I need to discuss the need for bad debts, the need for bad debt expense, the need for bad debts for outstanding or struggling balances. I can review management. I can review management basis for bad debts, that when they provide a bad debt, since what is the time zone, 90 days plus, 180 days plus, review the management basis for bad debts, etc. The standard credit terms are 30 days. Now look at the situation. Currently, the receivables are taking 85 days to pay. The standard credit terms, so that means there is a significant increase in the bad debt expense. There is a significant need of increasing the bad debt expense for this year. So try to make procedures out of the situation given, rather than writing the journal procedures, right? Circularizing the confirmation or writing something which is not in context. You could have utilized the results of the ratio. You could have utilized the credit controller is ill. You could have utilized the situation that the invoices which are 90 days more are important. Age analysis is important. So at least you can try picking up something from the case and translate them into procedure. I've just wrote a dummy procedures, right? But you need to ensure that a procedure is extracted from a situation. It starts with an action. It has a purpose. it has a subject matter. Discuss with whom. So if you say discuss whom, if you say review what, these are questions which makes your procedures better, right? Now, just one good example on my Word file. A second very critical area of your 100 marks paper is procedures. And if you're writing procedures, you should stick to one thing. Should be case specific. That's important, right? Should start with an action verb like review, inspect, discuss, recalculate, etc. Should have a source subject matter. For example, discuss with whom. So the moment you write with whom becomes the subject matter. Recalculate. What? The moment you think what, depreciation expense, amortization expense, that becomes the subject matter. Review. What? What are you reviewing? A bank statement? A cash book? So the moment you say, oh, review bank statement, oh, review cash book, review the fixed asset register, it becomes the subject matter. So that's what you need to think about, right? Every time you are discussing or you're recalculating or you are reviewing something, you need to ask a question, and that automatically translates into a subject matter. Should have a purpose. Why are you discussing or recalculating? Why are you recalculating? Because you want to confirm the accuracy. Or review. Why are you reviewing? Because you want to ensure that the figure is correct, or you want to ensure that there was a proper authorization. What? So this is what you need to think about when you are writing a procedure in the AA paper. I hope you're clear with this, right? Is that clear to all of you? Procedures, 1 mark per procedure, right? In exam, 1 mark per procedure. So procedure again is a critical area, right? Comes a number of times in exam paper, and you should be critical of improving your chances of getting 6 out of 6 when you're writing in the procedures. Okay, move out of this question now. The question number 1 has diversified parts relating to preconditions, relating to ratios, relating to audit risk, and relating to substantive procedures. You finally get into the question number 2 then. Now, we know this is a typical question where you find internal controls coming in the AA paper, and internal control again is a very popular area with your examiner. Weaknesses, recommendations, test of controls, key controls and test of controls, direct controls and test of controls. These are common phenomena, right? Now, again, in this question, the examiner is starting with a knowledge. Describe, not recommend, not list, just like the first question we did. 4, not more than 4, not less than 4. What? Describe 4 matters the auditor may consider in determining whether a deficiency is significant. How would you consider whether a deficiency is significant or not? Note, signpost. You do not need to refer to the scenario to answer this question. Such a wonderful statement. So I'm not looking at the scenario, right? Examiner saying, don't look at the scenario, just answer on a natural basis. So is this important? Rather than I waste time reading the scenario and try to find an answer for A. So is A a knowledge part? Yes. So you're not reading the scenario. Examiner saying, just describe the 4 matters when considering whether a deficiency is significant. So I'll write my answer here. A significant deficiency. Significant deficiency, 4 marks, and I need to have 4 points under. I'm not giving you the whole answer. You need to explain them, but you know a deficiency is significant when perhaps the amount involved, the amount of the deficiency is significant, right? That becomes a significant deficiency where the amount is significant, or where the likelihood where the volume or frequency is higher, for example, only one transaction not authorized, but hundreds of transactions not authorized, that becomes significant. So wherever you see something in a voluminous form, where the volume or frequency is higher of a deficiency, subjectivity or complexity of the deficiency, where you believe weakness is very complex or very subjective or a complexity of the deficiency makes it significant. And finally, the likelihood that the deficiency would result in a misstatement in financial statement. You believe there is a deficiency in the internal control system, which if not rectified, would impact the financial statement, which would result in a misstatement in financial statement. That is extremely important deficiency. 4, you need to explain them in proper sentences, at least make a sentence out of 1, 2, 3, 4. So if an amount is significant, the volume is higher, you believe there is a lot of subjectivity in that deficiency, and you believe that the likelihood of the deficiency would make financial statements materially misstated, then these are classified as a significant deficiency. Again, these are rewarding marks. So many rewarding marks, 4 ratios. Then we got rewarding marks, 4 preconditions. Then we got rewarding marks, 4 methods. Why a deficiency is considered a significance. 12 marks is easy. We only got 6 marks on procedures so far. We got 16 marks on an audit risk, which is a typical part of the AA paper. So please ensure you read the note numbers carefully. Please ensure you read the requirements carefully. Moving on, next requirement. Question number 2, next part, B. Okay, then comes a typical question in the AA paper. Identify and explain 3, not less than 3, not more than 3 direct controls on which auditor may seek reliance on. So from a case study, you have to pick 3 direct controls from the sales system, not from any other system, but from the sales system. And describe a test of control the auditor should perform to assess if each direct control is operating effectively. So if each direct control is operating effectively. So from the case, just pick up a direct control, explain why it is a direct control or explain the importance of that control, and then put a test of control. What will you do to ensure that the control is operating as stated in the scenario? A direct control means not a weakness, right? A direct control means an important control, which has been operated on the left-hand side of the screen. So when you're reading the sales system, you will find lots of controls which are operating in the best manner, which are operating as they should be operating. So a direct control is not a weakness, right? It is not a weakness in the internal control system, which is a very different question which comes in a AA paper. A direct control means a control which is operating effectively, but you have to justify what is the importance of this control when you're explaining a 1-mark answer. And then a test of control to ensure it's operating effectively. Let's look at quickly the definition of a direct control given in the examiner report. Back to the examiner report, we are looking at the question number 2 now. And in the question number 2, we'll be looking at the Whittaker company. And in the case of the Whittaker company, let's see the direct controls. Requirement number B, 6 marks. See what the examiner is telling us about our direct control. Marks are awarded for the identification of the direct control, half, and the explanation of the implication of the direct control to the company, half, and an appropriate test of control, 1. So picking up a direct control, explaining the direct control in the context of the company, and then putting a test of control, half, 1. Now let's see what exactly is a direct control. Examiner explains a direct control here. I'm reading the paragraph on your screen, which is the para in yellow. Okay, I hope you can see the para on your screen, the first one in yellow, right? This one here. Let me put a different color to this para. Okay. In order to be a direct control, candidate needs to consider whether the control as described has been appropriately designed and is being operated in such a way that it would in fact prevent or detect a material misstatement. That means the control in the scenario is operating as good as possible. Look at the first sentence again. In order to be a direct control, candidates needs to consider whether the control as described has been appropriately designed. So first of all, the control is designed wonderfully and is being operated in such a way that it would prevent the fraud and error from happening. So that means the control is operating soundly, right? Clear, everyone? Can you pick an example of it from a case study? Is everyone clear with the definition of a direct control? So a direct control is the one which is being operated and which has been designed perfectly in the scenario. And you believe there is no loophole in this control, there is no weakness in this control, and it's going as fine as possible. Is that clear to all of you? Just waiting for your answers to move on. Right. So let's pick up a direct control from the scenario as an example. Okay, I'm just reading the sales system of the company and just looking at the second paragraph here. The company operates a fully automated credit check process for all its new hotel customers. The automated system generates a credit limit for each new customer, which the sales director approves before the customer can place any order. She evidences her approval in the system. Look at this. Is this a proper control? That the credit controlling, the credit checks is automated. The system defines it. The system checks it, and the sales director is also authorizing it as an evidence that the control is operating effectively. If there would not be a sales director, approving before the customer can place would have been a very bad control. But along with computer, you have a sales director who keeps a check and balance on the working of the computer and ensure that, yes, this goes fine. So this is a direct control. You put this in a column and you then put a test of control. But how would you go about explaining a direct control? Automated credit check process. Okay. The company has an automated credit check process which is further approved by sales director, full stop. Direct control. Now you need to explain. This is a good control in place to ensure this is a good control in place to ensure that only credit-worthy customers are taken aboard. Only credit-worthy customers are taken aboard, and this reduces the risk of bad debts. Full stop. This is a good control, right? Because first of all, the system is automatically checking it, and then the sales director is approving it. So this is a good control in place to ensure that only credit-worthy customers are taken aboard the hotel. And this also reduces the risk of bad debts later if you're taking on a credit-worthy customer. Now, the company operates a fully automated credit check. So you can re-perform that. You can check the automated process going on, or it says the sales director approve before the customer can place an order. You can see some approvals of the sales director confirming she evidenced her approval in the system. So you can just recheck the system. You can just reperform the system for the credit controls, right? Something like that could be the test of control here, right? Because it's a system, it's an automatic system. So you can just reperform, or you can just recheck the system that the system is automatically checking the creditworthiness. So you can just pick a sample of some new customers during the year, and you can review that the system did check their creditworthiness and the sales director approved it. So something like this. Review a sample of new customers added during the year and ensure that the system did check them for creditworthiness and the evidence of sales director approval. So you can just check a sample of some new customers just to ensure that that things are going as it is. So that's 1 and 1, right? So a direct control, what that is, you should be familiar with a direct control. You should be sound with the direct control. You should know that a control being operative in the scenario, designed properly, operating properly, that is a definition of a direct control. And you need to explain why it is a direct control, why it is an important control, and then writing a test of control. So any control in the scenario which is preventing and detecting fraud or preventing and detecting error will be a definition of a direct control. 1 mark for a direct control, 1 mark for a test of control. Now, just one quick analysis from the syllabus area, internal controls. You know, internal control is another very important syllabus area which comes in the AA exams in section B and is a static requirement in the section B. But there's so much variety when it comes to internal controls in section B. Either the examiner would ask you weaknesses in internal controls. That's a very favorite question of your examiner, right? Weaknesses in the internal controls and recommendations. I hope you can hear me, right? Because there was just some disturbance with my internet connection. Is my voice getting through with clarity to all of you? Can you all hear me? Please confirm. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Can anyone just drop a message quickly so I can move forward? Okay, is it better? Is it better now? Okay, great. Let's move on. So weaknesses in internal control and recommendation, or examiner asking you key controls and test of controls, or examiner asking you direct controls and test of controls, or at times examiner even stretching, saying weaknesses, recommendations, and test of controls in one question. I hope you've seen that, right? So these are a variety of questions, right, which comes on internal control being an integral part of the section B. You need to be very good on this. Picking up a weakness, explaining the consequence of a weakness, why it is a weakness, and putting a recommendation. So whenever you're writing an answer for a weakness, please ensure that for each weakness, pick up the weakness and explain the consequences of the weakness for the company. Consequences of the weakness for the company. What will go wrong? What will go wrong? For 1 mark. When you're explaining a recommendation, put a recommendation as an auditor to the management. That is what the management should do, to improve the internal control, weakness. What the management should do. If they don't have a physical security, recommending them to have it, or if they're not performing a credit check, recommending them to perform a credit check. So that's how you recommend. Recommendations are normally shorter. Then finally, a direct control Pick and explain why it is a direct control. Why it is a direct control means why it is important in reducing fraud and errors in the company. Same goes with the key control, right? Key control has the same definition. Pick and explain the key control or the direct control and why it is important in reducing the fraud and error in the organizations. And then you go with the test of controls. In the test of controls, you need to be very clear that when you're writing on the test of control, you should start with the test, which is action. Again, test means an action, right? Start with the test action and then tell what you want to achieve with it. So if you're reviewing a sample of the new customer order, that is a test. But why are you reviewing a sample of new customer order? To ensure they were checked for creditworthiness and they were approved by the sales director. So start with a test and then tell what you want to achieve with this test to fetch 1 mark. So this is important, right, when you're going in the exam paper for internal controls questions, internal control question. So that's extremely important. But again, a regular feature of your exam paper. So that was in the question 2, which we were looking for. Marking scheme remains 1 in the entire AA paper, sorry, and that's the easiest thing to remember. Okay, again, the favorite question of the examiner, identify and explain the 5 deficiencies, so not more than that, but this time the deficiencies needs to be highlighted in the Whittaker payroll and bank system. So you need to find the deficiencies from the bank system and the payroll system, not the sales system, right? From the sales system, you had to pick up the direct controls. So now you have a payroll system and a bank system, and you need to provide a recommendation to address. Now that means bank and payroll. How many weaknesses? 5. You can pick more from one, less from the other. But you cannot say, okay, I'll pick all the 5 from the payroll and I'll leave bank 0. No, that's wrong. Or you say, I pick 5 from the bank and 0 from the payroll. That's wrong. You can pick more or less from the payroll and bank, up to you, but not 0. Again, there will be more than 5, but you have to choose the best 5 you can write on. So this is a typical question, right, which comes in the section B, which is now right in front of your screen. Moving on, again, the substantive procedures. They will not leave you, and the more fear factor you have, they will become more of a nightmare for you. Substantive procedures, this time on revenue. So you have to perform substantive procedures on the revenue, and you have 5 marks. So 5 substantive procedures, again, using the CASP. Now look at the paragraph. There is a paragraph here, which is on revenue. So this particular paragraph on revenue will become extremely important for you to dig out 5 good procedures. So you copy this paragraph and then start to investigate what 5 procedures can you make out of this paragraph. So you have to be within this paragraph, right? Not out of this paragraph. That is extremely important. Okay, you get to the next question then. This is the 3rd question we have started, right? In the 3rd question, this is the first part, procedures on revenue. You go further, you get another question in the 3rd, again, procedures. So see, procedures would not leave you in the AA paper. Procedures before and during inventory count. So what procedures will you be making before the inventory count and during the inventory count? You have 6 marks. So you have to break them down into before and during. I hope my voice is getting through to you with clarity. Please confirm that. Again, there is some distortion in the internet at my end. Just to confirm before I proceed further. Can you all hear me with clarity? Okay, thank you. So we have a paragraph here, right, which is about inventory right here. So this long paragraph on inventory will help you write procedures. So when you're writing the procedures on inventory procedures, examiner like you to break them under before and during. Now, how many you have to make? 6. So you can write more before and less during. You can write less before and more during. But you cannot say, okay, I'm not writing any before I'm writing all during. That will be wrong. So before and during, you have to write a total of 6. It's up to you which you write more, which you write less. There is a long paragraph here, right? Which will be guiding you. What will you do before the inventory count and what will you do during the inventory count? Normally before the inventory count, you plan for an expert, whether that is needed or not. You plan for the number of locations to visit. You plan for your resources. So normally before is about planning. And during is about you are taking a sample of the count and you're verifying the sample of the count, whether it exists or not. You're looking for damaged inventories, you're looking for slow moving inventories during the count, right? So a lot of things can go during planning and before and during the count from ISA 510, which deals with inventory count procedures. Okay, so another procedure oriented question. The next one, describe the substantive procedures. Again, this is the third time the same question. And this time the substantive procedures is on the share capital, because again, that is a paragraph given in the exam paper. So you go down and you look at, there is a paragraph, a very small one on the issuance of the share capital. So because it's an issuance of a share capital, there must be a board approval for that. Anything which is big, significant, there is a board approval for that, right? So there must be a board approval for the issuance of the share capital. You can confirm that to the balance sheet. You can confirm the share issuance document. Any proceeds coming from share issuance can be verified through the bank statement, etc. What is the central idea? Procedures are not out of the case. Procedures are within the case. You need to dig the case. You need to investigate the case. You need to be within the case. Now look at this exam paper. We had procedures on receivable in the question number 1. Then we had procedures on share capital. We had procedures on revenue. We had procedures on inventory, 4. And look at the number of marks which have gone in exam paper on procedure. We have almost like 4 marks for procedures here. And I think we had 6 marks previously for inventory. And then we had like almost 5 marks. So 6 and 5, 11 and 4, 15 marks. And I think on the receivable, we had 6, 21 marks on procedures. You cannot run away from them. And you need to be sound on them. I believe it is a scoring opportunity. How many of you believe this is a scoring opportunity in an exam if you know how to apply them and you can just dig them out from the case study and you can use the CASP? How many of you are sure with that CASP? How many of you are clear with the CASP and using it? 21 marks. Your failure or success lies on it. Tell me, how many of you are sound on CASP? 24 hours later, you have exams. How many of you are sure of digging CASP in exam from a case study? I remember, Eid, you were good on that. You submitted me a lot of assignments and you were pretty sound and clear on the procedure application. And I really appreciated your answers as well. How many of you are good, sound on CASP? Just waiting for your answers. Just tell me we are or we are not. Okay, thank you so much, Eid, for that. But other than Eid Muhammad, what is the situation of other students in terms of your performance on CASP and procedures? How many of you still have a nightmare with procedures? Can you just write, I do, I don't? How many of you have nightmares with procedures? Okay, so no one is claiming to have nightmares with procedures. So I think you're all ready set for Monday. Okay, just let's move back. Last requirement. And finally, the requirement is coming on the audit report. We know one of the requirement in the section B has to be on audit report, but it could be just for 5-10 marks, not more than that. We never see a full complete question on audit report, just a 5 marks question here. And this 5 marks question is putting the knowledge on CAM, key audit matters. And examiner is just asking a question, which is more simplistic on CAM, saying, describe the factors which the audit engagement partner would consider in determining the issue is a CAM. So what would the partner decide in concluding this is a key audit matter, number 1. And number 2, describe the content of the CAM section. Describe the content of the CAM section in the audit report. Okay, let me copy this question, 5 marks, and let's bring it down to my word processor. Describe and describe to. Okay, describe the factors which the partner would consider in determining the issue to be CAM. This issue means it's in the case, and describe the content of CAM in the audit report. Okay, let's see why this issue is a CAM. It is the 12th of November 20x5. During the audit of spinach company inventory, the audit team identified 5 product lines which were slow moving and conducted and concluded that the net realizable value of these goods was below cost. So you concluded that the NRV is below cost of these slow moving items. A significant write down of inventory was required in order to comply with IS2. So you need to write down the inventories to NRV. The audit partner has determined that inventory is now appropriately valued. So has the management rectified the inventory valuation? And the issue should be communicated as a key audit matter. Tell me, is this something negative or positive? Has the management written down inventories to NRV? Inventory is now appropriately valued. I hope you remember my lectures. A key audit matter cannot be negative. A key audit matter can never be negative matter, right? But a key audit matter is a significant matter which arose during the course of the audit. So do you believe inventory valuation is an important matter? Do you believe inventory valuation affects the financial statement significantly, primarily the cost of sales and the gross profit? So is it an important matter? And the partner is saying it is a significant write down. So must be significant in value. So this is a significant write down, number 1. So describe the factors which the partner would consider in determining this issue as scam. I think the first factor which the partner would consider is the amount. So it's saying it's a significant write down. Significant write down means the amount must be material. The amount must be material for the shareholder. Amount must be material for the decision of users of financial statements. So the partner is saying it is a significant write down, number 1. Number 2, inventory valuation is an important accounting principle, which is an important accounting principle and an area of focus during audit. So whenever we go to the audit, we do focus on IS2, right? Because it's an important part of the balance sheet, important part of the financial statement. We cannot ignore. We normally take inventory as a risky area. So inventory valuation is an important area and an area of focus during audit, and mostly is considered as a risky area because the management can manipulate the valuation for a higher gross profit. So what factors will the partner consider in determining this issue to be CAM? Number 1, because it's a significant write down, the amount. Secondly, inventory valuation is an important area whenever we go to the audit. And I think the third factor is the audit team identified 5 product lines which were slow moving. Let's see how many product lines they have. You are a supervisor in the company. I'm reading on the left-hand side of the screen. It's a listed company, and a listed company needs a CAM, right? Inventory. The company undertakes continuous inventory count, finished goods. They have 6 warehouses. The company has 1 factory, and this and so each inventory count is supervised. Let me see how many inventory lines they have. Okay, I think they've not given the number of product lines they have, right? Or I'm missing out somewhere. Okay, so the next factor is 5 product lines. 5 product lines are affected, which is a significant number. We don't know how many total product lines they have, but 5 is a good number. That's the reason the partner is highlighting that. So 5 product lines are affected, which is a significant number. So I think on these bases, you have to include this as a key audit matter. Now, describe the content of the CAM. Again, these are just a brainstorming, right? You need to write a proper answer. Describe the content of CAM. We know when you're writing a CAM, you need to tell 2 things in CAM. Number 1, why the matter was considered as CAM and how it was addressed during audit, explaining what the audit team did, on the inventory valuation. So the shareholder would like to know what exactly you did on the inventory valuation and on the net realizable value. I hope you know the content from my syllabus coverage. That CAM consists of 2 things: why the matter was considered as CAM and how it was addressed. So this is how you report CAM in the audit report. So you will tell shareholder why I considered inventory valuation as important and how I addressed this inventory valuation during audit. So this is the 5 marks of CAMs you can justify and explain. So, but please remember, CAM always comes in a listed company, and more importantly, it comes for matters which are positive. If inventory valuation is wrong, if inventory valuation is not adjusted, if management has not written down the inventory at the NRV, will you include CAM? Tell me. If the question says inventory is not appropriately valued, look at this line. Inventory is now appropriately valued. Make it negative. Inventory is not appropriately valued. Will you include CAM? No, it will lead down to a qualified opinion or an adverse opinion. So please be sure of CAM and how to incorporate it, right? So if you look at this exam paper we've gone through, and I just mentioned at the start of my session today that it is extremely important that you open the examiner report, because the examiner report for every exam sitting will contain the section A. And the section A contains the OT cases and the OT questions, where 60 minutes of your exam time is to be spent on. Now, once you've done the OT cases, you have revised the OT cases, you know how to do OT cases, you jump into the section B on the practice platform. Now, section B is a very static looking section where audit risk and responses, internal control, any type of question on internal control, procedures, and report is the 90% of section B. The remaining 10% can be knowledge, like examiner asking you preconditions or examiner asking you something like that, right? I'll just be reverting back once the electricity comes back. I'm just holding my session here. Take care. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz. So we were discussing that when you look at the actual paper, which is the section B 70% on the practice platform, there are significant areas which you need to have on your fingertips. Number 1, the risk and responses, the internal control areas, the types of questions which comes on internal control, which I've just highlighted in the session today. Procedures, substantive procedures is a very critical part. Reporting is 5 to 10% of the paper. That's not a significant part, but again, that is an area where you should be stronger at. Now, section B is so easy. If you know the types of questions, you've practiced at least 5 of them, 5 for risk, 5 of internal control, you've practiced 5 for substantive procedures, you would be in a far better position to know exactly what's happening on your actual day of exam. Section A is a more broader one where anything can come in, any sort of OT question can come in, but we know that it is easier if you read the case study for an OT situation. So if you read the OT case well, there is a fair chances you will take 70-75% answers correctly. And some of them are on the basis of the knowledge as well, which needs a greater understanding of the books and articles. So reading requirements is half success. I've just demonstrated that. Every time you open a requirement, look at what the examiner is asking. Describe, explain, list, recommend. Look at the note numbers under the requirements. Is the examiner saying not to do this or to do this? Look at the number of things examiner wants you to write: 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Look at the number of marks. Look at how many points will you be writing. So please ensure that is critical. Moving on. Marks allocation and number of points. I did demonstrated that. It's so simple in the AA paper that everything is worth 1 mark. So whatever you see, just divide it by number 1, and you see how many points you need to write. 1 mark for risk, 1 mark for response, 1 mark for weakness, 1 mark for recommendation, 1 mark for key control, 1 mark for test of control, 1 mark for direct control, 1 mark for test of control, 1 mark for every valid point you write anywhere in the AA paper. Case linkage. Whenever you're writing the answer, I just demonstrated that for procedures. Procedures have to be case oriented. If you're writing a risk, it has to come out of the case. If you're writing a weakness, it has to come out of the case. Try to connect yourself with case. Try to use the terminologies of case. If you're saying company, use S company, ESK company, which was in the case in the March, June 22 paper. Try to use the name of the company. If you're saying a director, but the question is saying finance director, then say finance director. Try to use the right terminologies, the name of the companies. Try to find information from the case and dump that into your answer. Try to rephrase the information in the case into your own words. That's how you can improve upon the case linkage required in the AA paper, and which definitely contributes to excellence in the AA paper. So case linkage in section B is critical, is vital, and that can improve the quality of your answer in the AA paper. Developing a point. Now, I was very clear on that. If you're writing a weakness, you need to justify the implication of the weakness, the consequences of the weakness. If you're writing a key control, you're justifying why it is a key control. You're writing a direct control, you're justifying how this control would reduce the fraud and errors in the organization. If you're writing a risk, you're telling why it is a risk. You're telling the impact of the risk on the financial statements. Everything you're writing has to be developed. If you're not justifying the why, the implications, the consequences, you're not trying to stretch your point, then you're not fetching the full 1 mark. You're fetching just 0.5 marks in that case. So which is very, very important. So developing a point is also very, very critical in the AA paper. So I hope with the practice on the platform where we looked at the section B and we went over the platform looking into different types of questions with the examiner report guidance in certain areas, and the reinforcement that you have to read the examiner report is very critical. Section A from the examiner report is very critical. And I hope this blending of information in the last couple of hours would really benefit you for your upcoming exams, particularly the time management, which came in focus today as well, that how would you be allocating the time within the section A and B of the paper. So when you're aiming for excellence, this is the list in front of you. Please ensure you're not in panic, you're not in hurry. 60 minutes in section A, 20 minutes per OT case. That is a good enough time to bring out the best results. Then you move to the section B, 135 minutes. You know the breakage of 135 minutes, the reading and planning time as well. Implement that. Don't be in a hurry. Try to understand and then connect. When you connect with the understanding, you will produce a better answer. I hope you're all confident enough ahead of your exams on Monday. Try not to panic out. Be calm. Be composed. Normally, we don't see something coming out of context in the AA paper, but if there is like a 4 or 6 marks requirement, or there is an OT question which you don't understand, don't spoil your exam sitting just that you don't know 10 marks in the paper. You still know 90% of the paper. So sometimes the student says, oh, I don't know these 10 marks, and they come in stress and panic and they spoil the entire paper. If you don't know 10 marks in the paper, leave them on one side, look at the 90% paper, attack it. There are opportunities in the 90% paper which can still get you 50 if you try to write a good answer. I hope you're all clear with that. And I hope you enjoyed this session today, which was aimed at the exams in September, excellence in the AA paper. And this was part of the drill of the March-June paper and the September webinars as well. So I wish you all a very best of luck, all of you. Thank you so much for joining the session at a short notice, and really apologize for the interruptions we had in between the session today. And this gets recorded and get on the YouTube as quickly as possible with all the support files and materials used. I wish you all the very best of luck, and I hope you liked the session. If you can just drop in a quick message before I say goodbye. Okay, thank you so much, Hunan, for that. I hope that this session boosted your confidence. This session improved your the perspective you look at the AA paper on Monday, the actual exam day. Thank you so much. I wish you all the very best of luck. My prayers, my well wishes are with my AA students, and I want you to excel on Monday. So try to be calm, composed, take intelligent decisions, take sound decisions in the context of 3 hours and 15 minutes so that you aim at success in the upcoming exams. Take good care of yourself. Have a nice day. Study effectively for the next 24 hours. And this is your tutor, Kashif Kamran, signing off from the AA Webinar to Success. Take care. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.